Thank you very much, Solomon, and warm welcome to everybody. What an amazing turnout for this call and for this meeting. I think certainly on behalf of Refugee Law Project, I would like to welcome you. I think I can also welcome you on behalf of the Conjugal Slavery and War Partnership, which we have been part of with Annie Bunting and many others for at least 5-6 years now. I'd like to say a thank you to Annie for proposing that we should co-host such a meeting. I think it's timely. It's clearly quite a major decision that has been reached, or a verdict has been reached, and obviously is provoking a lot of discussion, and we felt this would be a good space to air some of that discussion. As I say, our partnership goes back some time with funding from what is pronounced SHRC, SSHRC in Canada, and the DGF, the Democratic Governance Facility here in Uganda as well. And for us as Refugee Law Project, it's, the whole process is one that we have been, I would say, walking alongside for quite some years now as well. We've done field work in Odek, in Lukodi, in Pajule, victim consultations. We have sent victims identified in those places, from those places, for medical support. We continue to do group therapy discussions with survivors. We've had conversations around the Ugandan TJ policy with all its strengths and weaknesses. We have engaged in memorialization activities. So I think we feel as RLP very closely involved in the process. I should also add, we've also had discussions with the defense in this case, and that's something maybe we should come back to towards the end of this meeting. But in the meantime, I welcome you all. And as I say, it's an amazing range of people I see online, many faces and names that I haven't seen for several years. So it's a particular pleasure to see you there as well. And yeah, I think let me stop there in the interest of time. Thank you, Solomon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris, for those brief remarks and for sharing about the partnership that enables us to have this discussion today. Today, we are joined by Priscilla Aling. Priscilla is a member of the legal representative for victims in the Dominic Ongwen case that was before the ICC. And we're going to have Priscilla share with us briefly, what the perspectives are, but also what is the way forward for them as a team. Priscilla is a Ugandan lawyer working in the field as a field officer with the legal representatives for victims and in the Ongwen case. And she has interviewed, consulted with several victims and several clients to ensure that their views and concerns are reflected throughout the trial. And alongside Priscilla is a team of 3 who will also be engaging with us today and sharing their experiences. We have Vincent Oyet. Vincent Oyet is a teacher by profession, a resident of Lukodi, one of the 4 locations that is very central to the Dominic Ongwen case. He also serves as a secretary for victims of Lukodi and has been engaging as a focal point person with the ICC Field Outreach Office in creating awareness and screening of the ICC trial of Dominic Ongwen. Vincent is also a survivor of the Lukodi attack, so he will be sharing with us perspectives from where he sees the case and the verdict. We will also be hearing from Grace Achan Ogwal. Grace is a survivor and a victim of abduction at the age of 14. She spent 8 years in captivity until she escaped, returned home and was joined with her family. She currently works with women and children affected by war, focusing on securing financial futures of children born from forced marriages during conflict, but by connecting them with families of their fathers in as much as is possible. We will also hear from Alex Odong. Alex was abducted at a young age as well from Sir Samuel Baker in Gulu, and he successfully escaped and returned home. Alex currently works with the Ministry of Tourism in Uganda, Wildlife and Antiquities, under the Department of Museums and Monuments, and he is a very passionate advocate for memorialization as a critical aspect of documenting narratives of past atrocities. So that is the team we will be hearing from. We also, like Dr. Chris already mentioned, have a team of commentators who will, towards the end of this conversation, actually engage with us on some topics. So we have Crystal and himself as one of our resource persons on this call. We have Annie Bunting, as well as Luke Moffett, who will be joining us later on. Without wasting any more time, I'd like to turn to Priscilla Aling on this call, and really to just find out from Priscilla, from the work that you have been doing, moving around and engaging with victims and victim communities as a field officer with the legal representatives for victims, how has working with victims and victim participation been useful in the process of this trial? But also, what lessons can we draw from this in terms of the verdict that was passed down?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, Chris Dolan, and hello to everyone who has joined us today. Thank you for that introduction, Solomon. I hope everyone had the opportunity to hear my name, but I'll repeat it for the benefit for those who joined us later. My name is Priscilla Aling. I work with the legal representatives for victims in the Ongwen case, and our team represents about 2,600 of the 4,100 victims who participated and continue participating in this trial. That is just to give us a bit of context. Our team is led by Joseph Kwenyumanova and Francisco Cox. Regarding the process of the trial, when it started in 2016, I think one important thing was for us to learn and to unlearn some of the conceptions and misconceptions that we had prior to engagement. So our very first engagement taught us a lot, and it also helped to shape our strategy on engagement to ensure that, one, we have a clear understanding between the victims participating and ourselves, and that meant on the side of victims, them learning what the implication of participation is. That includes continuous engagements, and sometimes there's fatigue, there's so many questions that are asked over and over again, but that was one of the most important things because as many of you are aware, for Victims Council, our role is to represent the interest of the victims. So without sharing that a continuous engagement with them, we wouldn't have any ground to stand on before the trial. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was also to manage the expectations of the victims, because after 20 years of conflict and then nearly a decade of engaging with different CSOs, different entities, there's so much that has been built in terms of expectations and what they think it entails. So that was another thing that we had to talk about and make sure that we're on the same page. We know what is expected and what can be achieved at each stage of the trial. And then on our side, one thing that we also had to learn was to building that relationship with the clients or with the victims, because there are 2,600 people, and one, you need to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to engage, everyone gets an opportunity for their voice to be heard. So how we are going to do that, and just to build that relationship so that each and every person is comfortable enough to be able to open up. Because as many of you who have engaged with people, or even just with random strangers, it's not easy for people to open up about the experiences when there's no relationship. So that was one of the things, and it took months and years for some people, but eventually that was very significant for our engagement, and that is something that we continue to learn from. The other thing is also to identify and recognize the needs beyond the prosecutorial justice that everyone is chasing. Yes, we have all these people that are participating in the trial, but beyond that, they have needs, medical needs, economic needs, and in some instances, they were very important and they came out above and beyond what we're discussing at a particular point. So that meant that we had to also wear a different hat beyond the the one of legal representatives. We had to become resource mobilizers. We had to start identifying different CSOs, different organizations that are, are providing the different sort of services that are available. And one of the things that I recall us doing in the very beginning was visiting all the trust fund for victims partners and identifying where the areas of intervention is, so that we can share that information with victims, so that they know that if I have such and such a challenge, this is where you might get such support. So that's another thing that we had to learn. And then also to make sure that we are in position to do, our work, we needed to continuously learn. I remember attending a training on how to interview victims of sexual and gender-based violence, so that I am in position to be able to do this, because many of the victims face that. And then I also remember that our team talked to some experts, psychiatrists, on how to interview child victims, because then there are issues that might come up, or just to make sure that as you engage with someone, you do not, do more harm, and you do not have instances. And what happens when someone, is re-traumatized, or that, what they went through comes through. So that's another thing that we talked about, that we had to learn. And then in terms of what I believe the value of the victims participating in the trial was, one, on the legal side of it, I would think that it brought attention, our team and the engagement that we had with the victims and the information that we got from them brought attention to a lot of issues that were not earlier captured by the different parties that were already participating. And an example of that is the crimes relating to sexual and gender-based violence, for instance. If you, Salome, you mentioned some of them earlier, you know that they involve sexual slavery, or within the context of abduction. But along the way, our engagement showed us that many people were victims of sexual and gender-based violence within, during the period of the attack, or within the camps. They did not necessarily have to be abducted to be victims. And alongside that, we also learned that there were also quite a number of male victims of sexual and gender-based violence, which hadn't earlier come out in the trial. So that was one aspect that the victims contributed to the trial. And then also sort of giving a human face to what goes on in the trial. So it's not some abstract thing that happens, in the head, but it's sort of something that relates to an individual. For instance, we had many testimonies of people, carrying loads. I think all of us had of people forced to, to carry loads. They were abducted and taken to carry loads. But what does that mean for these people? And then we have, on the other side, victims coming up and telling us that I have chronic chest pain, I have chronic, headache. And that is the relationship between what the prosecution is presenting in the court as concerns the crime, and then what the effect is and the impact is along, on the lives of the people that we represent. And I think that was very important. So, and one of I think the most profound things that happened during the reading of the judgment on the 4th was when the president took time to read some of the names of the victims and some of the experiences that they went through. I think that was very important, because then everyone, one thing that I know that we have talked about is the importance of being heard and hearing either someone that they know being mentioned, or something that they know they experienced was very important. And after the judgment, we had many people calling us and giving us feedback that are happy, with what happened, and they believe that, the witnesses that were presented and the information we shared was very good, and as far as representing their interests. And I hope I have enough time for this last point. But the other thing that I think was very important was the other side, on the side of victims. What does it mean for them to participate? And one, I think, is the psychological benefit that many times is overlooked. One, I think all of them across the board have shared the importance of being recognized that they experience harm, and they went through suffering, and it's important that people know. they might not, sometimes they might say the government needs to know international community or the ICC, but that recognition of the harm that they experience is very important. And I think for the 2,600 plus people that we engage with, that is something that came through, and it's something that we continuously made sure that was reflected in the trial. And then the other thing is also the importance of talking with someone, you know. I think one thing that we might have not thought about in depth was the fact that for many people, talking to their legal representative was the first time they ever engaged on what they went through. And there are some interviews which involved someone failing to speak and breaking down. And that was also important. And we have had people come out later, you know, in the course of the trial telling us that I feel so much better now that I've spoken to you. I feel, and you also see it, you know, with some people in the beginning, they were not really present during the meeting, they wouldn't engage, but afterwards they're more confident in how they engage and how, you know, the kind of questions they give and the kind of answers that they give when you're consulting with them. So I think those are some very important aspects that I think going along, especially for the Ugandan context, it will be important for us to sort of borrow and learn from and see how it can, you know, work in the trials that are before the ICD. Salome, if I have time and if I've forgotten anything, kindly let me know and then I can speak on. If not, I can join later when others have had an opportunity. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Priscilla, for sharing that. And I think that if we have more time, I will still sort of engage on that front. But also thank you so much for sharing the details around what it took to actually have victims participate and that engagement and what that meant for them. So while we are all looking at a verdict that was handed down, what did it really take to get to where we are now? So thank you so much for sharing that. I'd like to now turn to Grace and just, you know, find out from Grace in terms of the verdict that was handed down by the trial chamber in the Ongwen case. As someone who has also been through, you know, a lot of hardship as a result of being a victim in this case. In 2018, though, you did give an interview to CBC radio in Canada, and you said, I quote, "I learned to do everything, however hard it was, in order to survive." I mean, those are very powerful words. And really, for you, Grace, what is the impact of Ongwen's verdict? How do you see, and what is the impact of that for you as an individual? How do you see? And do you feel that justice has been served in this case?
To me, let me first start by saying the Ongwen's verdict represents the legal side of justice, okay, which is good, and it's useful in dealing with the criminal issues, which is also important for the prevention of future occurrence. I mean, those who like to do the same thing will refer to this, which is also important. But to me personally, I believe in social justice. So Ongwen's verdict, to me, is something that I can say I am not satisfied with it, in a sense that it is not relating directly to victims that have been perpetrated. Because right now, even if Ongwen has been sentenced, I can not yet sentenced, but the case is going on, and we seem to know that he did this and that. But what will that impact on the victims that are currently here back home? Personally, I see it will not bring any change to me, because I see the change that I want is seeing that a victim's life is repaired, is reinstated to somewhere, because when it's just one person, I've been saying it's just like a drop in the bucket. There are so many others, and that we as victims live with them every other day, and we see them, just one person. The conviction of only one person will not change our lives. All that I want to see is the lives, the pain that victims are going through. Their lives that have not been, they have been set back. You see, someone, you said, you mentioned when I was abducted at a very early age. I can say I wouldn't be here if I was to stay at home. I would maybe be doing something else apart from doing this work, or like something, being someone else somewhere. Someone who has not gone through that pain, you know, and this someone who was injured, someone with it,
Sorry about that.
About it, she mentioned all these challenges that victims are facing. Yes, please.
Grace, we lost you for a minute back there. If you could repeat what you were saying.
I was saying, for me, justice to me means repairing the lives of victims, reinstating them, at least trying to lift up their lives from the way they are now. Those who are in pain, those who need psychosocial support, those who need reparation is needed for everyone, right? But this justice, even right now, I can see, like, I see like as if nothing has been done, because this is just one. We need more. And now what next after this? Nothing has been changed. What will ICC do in these places to these other people who are suffering? This is what I want to know.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing, you know, your views on what this verdict is, but also, you know, pointing out where next, you know, for the ICC and for this verdict, now that we, you know, have a guilty verdict and what that means, but also, you know, stressing the point that justice means repairing lives and of victims, you know, which sort of preempts a conversation around, you know, reparations and what next for victims and victim communities. Thank you so much for that. We will get back to that conversation also at a slightly later stage. I would like to turn to Alex. And Alex really also, you know, with a similar experience. Alex was abducted, like I mentioned earlier on. And one key question that Alex asked me once the verdict, the guilty verdict was read out was, if I had stayed, what would I also have been prosecuted and convicted like Ongwen? You know, a question that I know would have taken a much longer discussion, but Alex is here today, and I would just like to turn to Alex and find out, you know, as a victim of the LRA abduction yourself, what are your views on the Ongwen verdict and what informs the views that you hold? Over to you, Alex.
Hello.
Yes, Alex, we can hear you.
Okay, fine. Thank you, everyone on board. I think, let me give you my experience during the time of when I was with Connie. That was when this Connie sent one of his commanders who came and abducted us. And I really witnessed a lot of things. The very thing which those commanders were doing, it is the very thing which Ongwen was also doing. So there's no doubt for that. For me, it is true Ongwen committed some of those offenses. And I personally witnessed even from other commanders doing the same thing. These commanders had powers all over. They had the power to rape. They had the power to abduct, which I also witnessed, because when I was still there, they were abducting on a daily basis. They were forcing ladies into marriage, which I also witnessed. So I think to a certain extent, Ongwen has to face the law because he did it. Because if he doesn't face the law, people will not still be convinced that the law is taking place. So let Ongwen be judged according to the count which he did. But I personally, if I'm to give my opinion, I would say if there's any opportunity for the appeal, let the appeal be done in public court, just like bringing the court to where the scene, where he committed the offenses, so that his very, very own people can judge him on site. But the idea of convicting him from ICC, I don't think it's going to solve make any difference because still people will not believe. Me, I want to see when one day, after serving his sentence, we want to mix with him. Because as I talk, there are very dangerous people who are mixing with the community in Gulu as I talk. The likes of Banya, the likes of this gentleman called, let me cross-check his name. The like of Oloya Anguri. Oloya Anguri was extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Now he's a saved man. He's moving freely in Gulu now. This is the gentleman who even walked from Gulu up to Namugongo. If you can recall, there's a gentleman, a catechist, I think. So to me, I think let them went first, the law. Let it be an example for us to see that law is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alex. Really a call there on who else is, to face the law, but also, using prosecutorial justice as an aspect for guarantees of non-repetition, I think is what I hear from you, which Grace also did mention, to deter others from committing the kinds of atrocities that have been cited in this case. So thank you so much, Alex, for that. I would like us to listen to Vincent. Vincent is a survivor of the Lukodi attack, and really, Vincent, with the screening that happened in Lukodi on the 4th of February, what does the verdict mean to you, and what are the perceptions from the community, the people with whom you engage?
Yes, thank you so much, Salome, and all those people who are discussing these issues. As I've mentioned, I'm Vincent Oyet, one of the victims who attended the verdict on the 4th of February 2021. Indeed, for sure, people were very many. People kept time. We mobilized the fellow victims to come very early in the morning, though it was scheduled to take place by mid-morning. Indeed, people were very much attentive, following the counts one by one up to the last dot. And people clapped their hands so much after realizing that out of 70 counts, and scored 61 out of 70. When you make it mathematically, it could be like he has scored 87%, which is so great. Secondly, we victims, we appreciated, or we still continue appreciating the International Court for having protected us from human rights violation. Imagine the kind of killing that when is alleged, irrespective, killing all people like almost 60 years or 70 years, you kill them. Young kids, children under 5 years, mothers. For me, I feel it is very embarrassing and a nasty scene that I've ever seen in my life. So for all, people were very many, indeed, as I mentioned, and we appreciated that we have seen justice that has prevailed on us, following all forms of investigation done by the ICC. Others have been done by other sectors, having done all those. And we are very proud, having heard from our judges, trying to they struggle to read the names of our people who lost their life almost a number of years ago. So we have been longing to see justice being prevailed on the very day, on the 4th, which we appreciated the effort. Secondly, I need also to appreciate other sister organizations. As as Chris has put it, Refugee Law Project has done a lot in my community by giving medical treatment to our people. To me, I feel it is not enough. We expect a lot after the final ruling, because in terms of payment, you can't, life lost. It will never be again anyway. And even to have to pay, I don't know how much you have to pay, but those ones still surviving. I feel their life, as as mentioned, they need to at least to improve on their life. On the side of the alleged person, Dominic, I think it is okay for him. He deserves it, as I said, because it will prevent other leaders who may have the intention of doing the same. They have maybe they can have that fear. So if for further reference, it will act as will avoid the kind of impunity work among our leaders. We are all human beings, irrespective of the color, the size of the tribe mate. I'm not regretting anyway. Though when is my tribe mate, and actually by tribes or Ugandans. So to me, I see international court or ICC as an international court that cut across respecting the rights of human beings. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vincent, and participants. You have all heard the mood in Lukodi, as Vincent has reported from when the verdict was read on 4th, as well as some of what the community feels. Just to also note that we have community members as part of this call and who are participating. So along with Vincent, we have a community from Lukodi that is also part of this call. We also do have victims from Zaipi in Adjumani, which was also impacted by the LRA conflict, and they are also a part of this call. Interpretation is available on different field officers that are participating in this call. Now, before we take some feedback and comments and questions, we've really had a call from three of our victims around and talking strongly around guarantees of non-repetition. Yeah, and seeing this case and this verdict as one such thing. But maybe back to Priscilla, just to understand what next for the legal representatives of victims. What is in the pipeline? What next, given the conversations we've had around the needs of victims at the moment?
Thank you, Salome, for that. Our work continues, as I mentioned, and I've had some people say that this is actually where our work starts more than ever. So we have been, even during the lockdown period, we have been working on our different strategies, because then there are two things that, are going to run concurrently. There is the sentencing, and now that there's a conviction, and then there is also the issue of reparations. So it is still our role to continue to engage with our clients and the community in general, because they are all, like you mentioned, many people are seated in Lukodi and they're listening to you. They do not exist alone. They're the rest of the community that was also affected and will continue to be affected by what happens in the trial. So we will continue to engage with them on reparations. One, we are collecting views and trying to see how best we can harmonize these views, first of all, because as you understand, there are different conflicting needs. Someone who is elderly has different needs from someone who is young. Some of them want housing, some of them think this is more important. And then there's the overarching problem, which is the limited resources, which we foresee might, be there. So one, we continue to document that and then to see how to harmonize it and eventually present it to the trial in the best way possible, so that by the time the trial starts to, by the time the panel starts to discuss reparations, their views is, are ready to be considered. And then on the sentencing, we have also been, collecting views of people. And one thing that is important for everyone who is listening to know is that even the clients or the victims are as conflicted as everyone. There are people who also recognize the fact that he was the convicted person was a child soldier, or these are the things that he went through. Just like Alex said, he knows other people who also went through the same thing. So there are people who think that, and then there are also the other people who think that nothing excuses what, what the convicted person did. So these are the discussions that we try to bring forward and bring the nuances, get people to see the situation from the other person's shoes, to see if their opinions would change. And then ultimately, these are things that we will be presenting to the trial. And I think, as you're aware, we're supposed to make our filings by the beginning of April. For sentencing. So that's all I can share for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for sharing, what your next steps are. And also, I'm sure that with the various victim groups listening into this call, really the reception of what you're trying to do right now will be highly positive. So with that, we are now at the time for feedback and comments, as well as some questions that we have to participants. And I'd like to just kickstart, as we put up our hands, there are also some questions that have come through the chat. So I'll read a few of them and then get to participants that would like to ask any questions. We have a question here from Joel, and he's asking, his question is directed to Grace. Knowing that a guilty verdict is not enough for you as a victim, what is your preferred form of reparations? Given that there is a verdict, but it is not enough for you. So how do you think reparations should happen? So that's one question there for Grace. And we also had Priscilla mention about some of the needs of victims. And Vincent also did mention RLP's work around rehabilitation of victims, especially in Lukodi. And we know that the ICC Trust Fund for Victims has also done a lot of work really around addressing and responding to needs of victims. And so I'll also ask Scott Battelle, who's on this call, to share something briefly about the work that they have done. Now, before I hand over to Scott and to Grace, I'd like to take I'll be taking a question from Tony and then Maria.
Well, thank you so much for organizing this webinar, RLP and everybody. My name is Tony. And I would just like to know what is
Tony, could you increase we can't hear you really well. You're really low. A little louder,
okay,
please. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I would just love to know what is the sort of relationship between RLP as an organization and the ICC in general. You mentioned that you jointly work with the Trust Fund for Victims, but what sort of relationship is there? Is it form of an intermediary relationship or anything else that you would maybe want to point out? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question, Tony. Maria?
Was just thanking you for organizing this meeting. We are happy that we have the opportunity that you are doing this, because we're in this together to ensure we do not only collect the views, but look at what we are.
Maria, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I don't seem to see Maria. Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing that and for the update. If there was anyone who could not hear what Maria was saying, she did speak about the work that the ICC Outreach Office in Uganda has been doing in terms of working with victims and victim communities. And she also has placed a lot of she has talked a lot around the need to work together to manage expectations. Also informing us that the defense lawyer has requested for another 30 days to have the verdict translated, the ruling translated into Acholi. And also, pointing out that this case it's a potential appeal case, and an appeal could go either way. So really the conversation and the call to really engage with victims more, manage expectations, knowing that an appeal could happen and an appeal could go either way. So thank you so much for that, Maria. And I think that it's a call that remains very relevant to all of us. So with that said, before we take on any other questions, we are really running also on time. I would like to ask Scott to share the work that they have been doing with the ICC Trust Fund for Victims in Northern Uganda, which would also speak to some of the needs and the lived realities that victims have in communities.
Yeah, no, it just unmuted me. Thank you, Charlamagne, and thank you, Refugee Law Project, and your partner for this engagement. I think it's very important to start the discussion and to start sharing ideas and our experiences with one another as we try to find our way forward now that the verdict has been reached. Yeah, I think as we're all aware, I mean, this is by far the largest case to come out of the ICC thus far in terms of the number of crimes for which the perpetrator was convicted of, the scope of the crimes that were charged and convicted, and the potential number of victims that may be eligible for eventual reparations. It will certainly be a great challenge and a large undertaking for the court and for the trust fund to deal with. I won't say anything about the reparations because we don't know, as has been mentioned. There are a number of procedural steps to come before the court makes its decisions concerning reparations. But just for the trust fund, there was a question earlier about what is the relationship between the trust fund and the court. The court and the trust fund were both created by the same, the same treaty. The Rome Statute created the court, and it also created the trust fund. So we are connected and related to one another. The trust fund is also probably the primary mechanism through which the court would implement reparations. We, the trust fund, are implementing reparations in 3 other cases right now that have come out of the court, 2 in Congo and 1 in Mali. We will see what happens in the Ongwen case moving forward. But we are the mechanism through which the court would implement the reparations, and we will see what the court decides with regards to the form of those reparations going forward. We, the Trust Fund, have been working in Northern Uganda since 2008. We've been implementing assistance programs that have now reached more than 56,000 people across the region, providing very important and life-changing, assistance to people. Reconstructive plastic surgery for people who had their lips or their ears or their nose cut off, or providing artificial limbs to amputees, providing much needed counseling training, and others who are survivors of sexual violence or abduction or witnessed horrific events. We're providing important livelihood support to people, VSLA, agriculture programs, vocational training, and a variety of other things. And so I think it's the work that we have done is absolutely important and crucial to the lives of the victims, as many of the people have already attested to here. The need and the importance of addressing some of those wounds and injuries that they've suffered that persist to this day is an absolutely crucial part of our work. And so I think we stand ready with a number of capable partners right now working with us under assistance that we may be turning to in the future as we plan and prepare for eventual reparations in the case. We have partners implementing services across the region, and so we have partners that are within the kind of the geographic regions that are likely to be part of in a reparations order. And so we stand ready to mobilize them, to mobilize resources from donors and member states as we work to vindicate the rights of victims in the case, vindicate their right to reparation and repair. Okay. I'll leave it with that. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for that brief overview and a bit of a look into the work that the Trust Fund for Victims has been doing in the region and continues to do. So there was a question to Grace in terms of reparations, also bearing in mind that there are very many views of what reparations should look like and what it should be or what it should not be. So Grace, the question from Joel is, what would it look like for you?
I'm just one person, but there are very many victims. I'm going to speak on behalf of victims. For me, I see there are varied atrocities that were committed to people. And I cannot say this is the specific way I want it addressed. What I'm saying is we need a holistic approach of reparation that will deal with things like psychological issues, medical, compensation, reconciliation, because you can address one, the other one is still affecting someone. We need a whole thing, like a package that will be able to address all sections of victims. We have male victims of rape, we have the female, they have different issues. So for me, I look into a holistic approach of addressing these issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Grace. I will take another round. We have Dennis Juko, whose hand has been up, and then we have a number of questions in the chat. So I'll take Dennis, then read out the questions in the chat as we move towards also hearing from the commentators. Dennis, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Salome, and the entire RLP for putting this together. Actually, I posted my question in the chat room, but maybe I can read it out. I'm just happy that it engages, my area of research. The webinar engages my area of research, and I've been also following this process closely. But my question is it is clear that the criminal justice mechanism that tries on Ongwen, but also others, may not provide for all the justice needs of the victims and stretch far from the conviction of a perpetrator like Dominic Ongwen. So is there a possibility of integrating international criminal justice mechanisms and customized, by customized, I mean community-led justice frameworks? Like, we can borrow lessons from the Gacaca of Rwanda, but also the community-led processes in northern Uganda. Is there a possibility of integrating them with the international criminal justice systems to deliver justice to the victims or survivors of violence, but also irrespective of the outcome, of what the outcome may be from the appeal? It could be another conviction or an acquittal. What is the mechanism of guaranteeing a continuation for delivering justice to the victims? Because irrespective of the outcome, victims will still need responses to their unique justice mechanisms that are not provided for by the International Criminal Justice Framework. So those are my questions.
All right, thank you so much for that. Just looking through, I'm trying to pick out some questions that we have. Someone has asked, Moses Emeron has asked, is there a chance that the rest of the oppressors will be brought to book to pay for their deeds? That's one question. James has asked why was not a single member of government forces prosecuted in the ICC in relation to Northern Uganda conflict? Sorry, just running through the questions. We have a number of questions here. What will happen to victims of crimes allegedly committed by the LRA chief, Joseph Kony, in case he is never arrested and tried before the ICC? Now that's something that we can't answer now, but the case we are talking about right now is the Dominic Ongwen's case. He was tried, convicted for crimes he committed. So that's really what we are focusing on. Ongwen is still Kony is still at large, and I'm sure, like many of the victims have shared with us right now, it's their prayer that he also gets to meet justice, as we have talked about. So Dennis's question is done. From the field in Zaipi is in Arinyapi. We have a chat here. They are grateful that Ongwen was brought to book, but want Kony and other perpetrators to be brought to book as well. So they feel left out because the investigation focused on 4 locations. So they hope that a national prayer can be held to promote healing. They are asking for the psychosocial support as well as boosting their incomes. They are also thanking RLP for the medical rehabilitation that is part of the healing process. So thank you all so much for that. We have from Richard saying, while interacting with victims at St. Monica, some of their key demands were reparations, included in settling them and their children born of war, building them houses, educational support, and for their children. There is a question as well to Scott, how many victims are you planning to support in the next 5 years? Yeah, so a series of questions coming in there. It's 5:06 right now, and just to answer a few of these questions, and then I'll also hand to the commentators who will feed into some of these questions that have been asked, is that for Tony, who asked about the relationship between the ICC and RLP, Maria and Scott both mentioned, what their work is, but RLP is an outreach project of the School of Law, Makerere University, and the work that we do under the Conflict Transitional Justice and Governance Program is really looking at legacies of conflict and how we can move towards addressing them. So critical to our work that Dr. Chris Dolan did mention as we were opening was the work we've done around transitional justice as an aspect of bringing about healing, talking about accountability, and reconciliation for post-conflict communities in Uganda. So that also sort of builds a bit into the question by Juko, is there a possibility for community-led processes and ICC, the International Criminal Justice System, to work together to address legacies of conflict? This is where most of the work around transitional justice is coming from, but also just to note that Uganda right now has a national transitional justice policy, which policy implementation of will actually will look into having traditional justice, formal justice, and how those two work together in complementary aspects to each other. I would like to, because I'm looking at the time, I would like to, there's a question for Scott. How many victims do you plan on supporting in the next 5 years? And then, yeah, we'll have Scott answer that, and then I'll be directing a few questions to some of our commentators as well.
Well, for the next 5 years, it's difficult to say because we have a program right now that's a 5-year program, but that started in 2019. So we have about 3 years remaining on the current program cycle. And then under that program cycle, it'll be between 22,000 and 24,000 that we expect to reach in the next 3 years of the program. As to the 5 years, we don't know what will happen after that. But under the current program cycle, we hope to address an additional 22 to 24,000 people in the next few years on the program. The assistance program may continue after that. We don't know at this point. In particular, that's yet to be decided by the board at the relevant time. And then we will see. Also, we may be simultaneously implementing assistance programs and reparations programs simultaneously in the north as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Scott, for that. Rosalind, do you have a question? I see in the chat that you have a question. So I'll give to Rosalind before I ask a question that has been addressed to Grace, Vincent, and Alex.
Hello, I don't have a question. It's just to follow up on, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, it's just to follow up on what Grace was saying and to say that the issues of human security come into play in what she was trying to say about the social justice aspect. Because I just want to ask, is this verdict going to solve the anxiety, the fears, and the trauma, the flashbacks of the victims? No, of course not. So this calls for constant engagement with the victims. It cannot be just a one-off thing with them. It has to be constant because
this brings to mind our own situation in Sierra Leone, where we have all of these war-affected people, especially the ones we are dealing with, that is the survivors of sexual violence during the war. Many a time people keep saying, oh, the war is over 19 years ago, there is no more war and all of that. But we still continue to work with them because we are fully aware that they have psychosocial needs, they have socioeconomic needs, and they really need to be built up so that they can become resilient. So these are the issues. Apart from the justice aspect for the ICC, we also look at how they can weave into their societies. And this takes time. It cannot be a one-off activity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, and really a call to also building onto, you know, what Priscilla did share around it. It doesn't end here. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I would also like to move to our commentators who are on the call, and really to just give an opportunity to Annie to share with us. We have this verdict and all that is within, you know, subject to, or it's possible that there could be an appeal. But really, what are some of the legal processes and gaps in the Ongwen verdict? We've seen cases, we've seen comments here back and forth on if there's an appeal, it should be in the community. What is social justice really in this case, but also how is the verdict reading with how jurisprudence then progresses in terms of a case like this one.
Thanks so much, Salome, and thanks so much for so beautifully moderating this really important discussion, and thanks to all of our colleagues at RLP, and also in particular, obviously, to Alex, Grace, and Vincent for sharing their perspectives, and Priscilla for supporting the victims through your work. So I just want to try and address that really quickly, because I know there's lots of other questions in the chat and in people's minds, and we want to hear again from Grace and Vincent and Alex. So absolutely right. I mean, I love how this whole discussion has been framed about voices and perspectives beyond the courtroom. And I think that those of us concerned with reparations and holistic programming to meet the needs of victims going forward have to use this as an opportunity and a springboard to push for those really meaningful sets of reparations. I do also think that it's an opportunity for discussion and debate. As Priscilla said, there's lots of debate, there's lots of nuance, there's lots of conflicted opinions, and these are the decision, and the verdict has actually opened up that space for us to have these conversations. And with that, I think that, you know, one of the things we have to be very mindful of is that some discussions and some verdicts can lead to other exclusions, marginalizations, and silences. Grace mentioned that there's sexual violence experienced by men and boys, and of course, Chris Dolan can speak to this more, but the attempt to include indictments for those crimes was not successful. So that's not part of our historical record through the Ongwen verdict. So that will, obviously, we need to continue to document, memorialize, and discuss those important issues. The government of Uganda, as someone asked in the chat, is not subject to indictments at the ICC. This was a referral from the government of Uganda on the Ongwen case, right? So again, this can be used as a springboard to push for indictments from perhaps in the domestic, the International Crimes Division. Whether that happens, frankly, I'm skeptical. But again, it's something that we need to keep pushing for. And again, using this decision to think about the transitional justice policy in Uganda. So I just want to underscore one final thing, which is the role of NGOs and civil society organizations. This has been a very broad set of strategies, and it actually hasn't been possible without NGOs and CSOs supporting victim survivors in Uganda, but also, as Rosaline was saying, ongoing engagement in Sierra Leone. We had a comment from our colleagues in Rwanda about the Gacaca process there. And I just think that we have to, keep in mind the support that's needed at the local level and with our NGO partners. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Annie. And I will move next to Scott. There's been a lot of conversations on reparations and what reparations should be. There is a comment here of Ongwen has been, if he's found, guilty, who will be responsible to compensate and avail those reparations to victims? And what will be the responsibility of Uganda? Well aware that many of the victims have not received support from government at the moment, like we heard from Scott, the work they've done. RLP and other similar like-minded civil society organizations have been engaging a lot. And so the question around reparations, and given the work that you have done around reparations, what could this look like? You're just trying to envisage what this could look like. Over to you, Luke.
Hi, Salome. Thank you. And thank you for, it's a really good question. I think it also addresses the question on the chat there about who pays reparations, and the way in which the ICC works is that it'll be ordered against Dominic Ongwen. And of course, he's going to have no money. And so that means that donors will have to contribute to make up that deficit. And the difficulty is that with the International Criminal Court, that most of the money that goes to it is for the court. So we have 145 million euros provided to the court each year, and very little provided to reparations or to the trust funds, so less than 4 million euros. And so we need to think now, how do we sort of mobilize donors to support this case? But as Salome mentions, we also have a bigger problem here, and Grace put it really well, that with the Ongwen case, it's a drop in the bucket, that the victim population in Uganda goes beyond just the 4 sites. So how do we reach those bigger group of victims? Well, that's the responsibility of the Ugandan government. It needs to implement the transitional justice policy and set up a reparations program, because otherwise we're going to create an inequality between those victims who are able to access reparations before the ICC in the Ongwen case. So really just the 4 sites, and just for the crimes that are convicted and aren't successfully appealed. So it's very, very limited. And so the gap needs to be filled by the Ugandan government. Donors need to support that in different ways, by providing direct funding or by providing technical support. And I think, what we need to also remember is that this is not going to be a quick process. If we look at the Taganda case, it finished in July 2019, where he was convicted. Experts were appointed last year in May, and we're expecting a judgment on reparations in the next few months. So it's almost taken 2 years after the conviction to get anything done on reparations. So this is a long and very slow process. I know, speaking to the community in Lukodi, even in 2015, when Ongwen was arrested, that there's an expectations that reparation would be soon. Sadly, it's not. And so what we need to think about now is, how do we mobilize donors? How do we mobilize the Ugandan governments to provide maybe interim relief at the moment for victims who are quite needy, who are quite vulnerable, who are suffering from ongoing health issues, are old and disabled, and to mitigate the harm, so that in 2 years' time, when reparations start to be implemented at the ICC, that they can benefit from them, and we're not left in a situation like in Taganda or the Katanga case, where victims have died before ever seeing reparations. So it's a long process, and it's not going to be a complete process. We need more actors involved on reparations for victims.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, for sharing that with us. In terms of giving a look into who would pay, should we be going that direction, but also the conversation on reparations is very huge, and to just share some of the perceptions we have with communities as we move around with the work that we do, which Priscilla has also shared, and a number of the victims do share, is with reparations, when will it start? So in terms of, okay, are we talking about reparations with a specific group or beyond that? So I think that that's a conversation that we have to continue having, but also while managing expectations, like Maria did share. Before I move to our fourth commentator, I would like to ask Priscilla, there's a question here, or at what point did, a small question here to Priscilla, maybe if Priscilla could help us answer this. At what point did Ongwen transition from becoming a victim to a perpetrator? You know, and because that's also a broad conversation that people have been having, just like Priscilla shared, victims are as much divided between the two as everyone else. And this is something that Priscilla had discussed earlier on in a very clear way. So maybe over to you, Priscilla, in about 2 minutes, if you can answer that, then we can move to the final commentator.
Sorry, I was having trouble with the connection. Thank you for that question. It's a difficult question to answer, and I think that is the discussion that many people have been having since you know, the verdict was read 2 weeks ago, I hope. But what I do understand is that what I can share is that the role of determining who a perpetrator is on the prosecution, and basing on the investigations that they did, they found that the 5 people with Dominic Ongwen inclusive were people who were believed to have participated in you know, the attacks and inflicting violence in northern Uganda. And for Ongwen himself, the fact that he was he either surrendered is the reason why he's being tried. But that discussion is also, we also have it among our clients, because there are many people who still ask that same question, just like I think Alex asked earlier on, that some of us who participated, would we also be, you know, we will also be treated as criminals and all that. I think there are many things that are involved here. There's a period, some people, of course, I think received amnesty. And for the rest of the people who didn't receive amnesty, they are looking at least from the ICC perspective, they look at the top people who participated. They don't look at every person, because then they are the what is it called? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but you know, they're looking at people who participated at the top level, those who planned and instructed, those who were involved at that level. So there are many nuances involved when determining who is a perpetrator and who charges are brought against. And I think that again is the role of the prosecution. And you know, as victims, we also look at the people who you know, who say they you know, they were affected in such and such a way from what the prosecutor is reporting.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. Priscilla has shared that there bit also of the conversation on command responsibility. I see Maria's hand is up. Maria, can I give you a minute?
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me better. Is that correct? Okay, fantastic. Just in addition to what Priscilla was saying, to ice the fact that the question about who determines the perpetrator victim and this age thing, I'm sure it's something that we have talked about extensively. The prosecutor had been very clear, and this is something also the judges recognized in the decision. First, there is a recognition that he was a victim in terms of the abduction that he suffered. However, the Rome Statute does not investigate any person that was below the age of 18 when the alleged crimes were committed. So the case here is Dominic Ongwen was tried and convicted for crimes he committed when he had passed the age of consent, when he was within the age of consent, implying that he was brought between victim and perpetrator. So the crimes relates directly to what he may have, well, now we cannot say may, or according to conviction, that he committed his crimes when he was above the age of when he was a child. I thought it is important for us to understand that. What the details of the conviction and whether those will be mitigating factors, when the judge was rendering the verdict, he made that clear, and it is entirely up to the parties and participants to make those mitigating circumstances applications.
Thank you so much, Maria. Maria was basically adding on to a bit of what Priscilla also shared, and talking about when we talk about the charges against Ongwen, at what point did the ICC look at that from, and really looking at the age of 18 as the age from which the atrocities committed were charged of. Looking at the time we have, I still see some more questions, but what we are going to do is we'll have these questions down and be able to reach out with our teams on some of the responses to this. I would like that before we close, we hear from Chris Dolan. There's been lots of conversation around what victims still need, social justice, and what more engagement that is needed, what some of the victims still need, managing expectations. So from various angles, clearly there is lots of work that still needs to be done. Like someone mentioned, our case has just begun. So I would like to hear from, I'd like us to hear from Dr. Chris, and really the question of what next for civil society in relation to prosecutorial justice, but also transitional justice as a whole.
Yeah, thank you very much, Solomon, and thanks again, everyone who has contributed to what has proven a very rich discussion, I think. And I think has proven the importance of having a discussion of perspectives from Uganda and the interaction with our many colleagues from around the globe. I think internationally, people are always eager to see the ICC as a location of norm change, and as a leader, as a way of leading us in our thinking about what constitutes a crime, who should get prosecuted, and so on. Of course, even while as has been said today, we don't know whether the verdict will stand, so we shall wait to see whether it's appealed, whether it will stand. But even if it does stand, and we welcome then the norm changes that reflects, I think what the conversation makes clear is we have to be very careful to avoid any kind of legal triumphalism, for want of a better word. I always worry about people seeing prosecutorial justice as the key to non-repetition, because I think that what comes out of a conversation like this is that there are so many issues which, if not addressed as part of what Grace called a broader social justice, are almost certain to fuel repetition at some point. So the question of the relationship between prosecutions and reparations, if we use reparations to talk about all those other social justice issues, I think is terribly important, and I think we're still nowhere near getting that right. I remember a trip to Sierra Leone about a decade ago and learning, and maybe the figures are now out of date, but at that time the special court had cost something like $450 million, and the reparations fund had received $2 million. And we've just heard another similar kind of figure for the annual expenditures of the ICC versus reparations funds. Clearly there's a terrible imbalance between what the international community is willing to fund and what victims and survivors are actually asking for. And I've been in this discussion for many years now, as have many people on this call, and I think we would all agree that that call has been there from ever since you first step into the discussion. This is what you hear. So the fact that we're still at this point having to discuss it, I find very problematic. I think we have to recognize that the whole court process is looking for clear-cut winners and losers, and yet, as Priscilla has said, the victims themselves are conflicted about some of this discussion and how it's playing out and how some of this process. So I think there is a huge role for civil society to get at all of the non-prosecutorial dimensions of a broad social justice. And as I say, I think this conversation, brief though it has been very valuable in terms of highlighting that. And you know, I think that there's value for us as conveners together with Annie and CSIW in seeing whether this was just part one of a multi-part conversation where we can maybe dive into some of the issues that have been raised today. So let me say a final word of thank you from Refugee Law Project on behalf of all of my colleagues who haven't maybe had a chance to speak, and also for CSIW and Annie. It's really been great to have you all in this. I hope if we do get to a phase 2 or a part 2, we'll have a similar level of engagement. It's really been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. And in 1 minute each, I would give an opportunity to Vincent, Alex, and Grace to, give us their final word on this call. So Vincent, to you in 1 minute.
Yes, thank you so much, Solomon, for having brought me in this engagement. My humble appeal to all of you, let us continue in a way that we can protect the rights of human beings. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex, and then we'll have Grace finally. As we wait for Alex to come on, Grace.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, though it was just, the time was too little. I didn't say all that I want, and here with many participants, we have very many questions to actually put forward, but there is no time. My request is if there can be another time that we can still share more of this and talk about children born of war and the effects. There's so much to talk about in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for participating. Alex, over to you in 1 minute.
Yes, thank you so much. My request is, if possible, I would like to request Refugee Law Project to have a reunion with Saswell Becker boys and Abok girls, so that we can sit on the round table and we discuss our relationship.
Okay, all right, Alex, we've had that request. I will check if that is something feasible for us. But really to just say, it's 34 minutes past 5. We started 6 minutes late, and so we have just 2 minutes to conclude this conversation. Thank you so much to everyone who has participated, to those who have stayed on the call to now. Thank you also to our commentators who have been with us through this call and for sharing. Like has been said, there's really still need for a lot more engagement, but as we close this potential first phase of a conversation, really just to note that as we seek justice for atrocities committed, victims need to stay central to conversations, as the reality of justice is not an issue of either or, but a more complex set of facts that we have to work with. And with that said and done, I'd like to say thank you once again to everyone who has participated. This was made possible by a partnership with Refugee Law Project and the CSIW. Thank you so much. It's 5:35, and I wish you all a good evening, good day, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're in. Thank you.